I'd love to turn to this next block, transformative lives, challenges, and opportunities.
Welcome to TwinTech 2020. I'm Anitha Vadavatha, founder of d.Cent Labs, and I'm honored to actually welcome our two incredible guests that we can sit down and have a chat with today. Dr. Jennifer Schneider, who is the president of Livongo, and then Lee Shapiro, who is the chief financial officer of Livongo. Before I even start, I would say congratulations. Big year for Livongo and for both of you for this incredible merger with Teladoc. So before, I want to know all the juiciest details possible on that. But before we go there, how did you start? Really walk us through your journey of how did you both meet? How did the even Livongo journey start?
This journey, started with an idea that our healthcare system is truly broken in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to helping individuals with chronic disease. The executive chair of Livongo, the founder of Livongo, Glenn Tillman, and I have been business partners for over 25 years. Some of you may know Glenn as Howard's little brother, and Howard is a longtime supporter of Twin. And what we learned through his journey with his son Sam, who was diagnosed at age 12 with type 1 diabetes, is that our system makes it so hard to do the things that you need to do in order to stay healthy. And I know that Jenny feels a real kinship to those who are facing this because of her own personal circumstances. And Jenny, maybe you want to share a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. So I've lived with type 1 diabetes since I was 12. I'm now 45, so for 33 years, and I'm also trained as a doctor. So I've gotten to see that world of chronic conditions from the lens of the patient as well as the physician. And the reality is the system is broken, like Lee said. As people living with chronic condition, you're asked to record data to then see a doctor 3 months later to help identify what happened 2 months ago on a Wednesday at noon without any pattern recognition. It got to be the point, even when I was young, that I realized that there wasn't a whole lot that was making sense in that dialogue because the data was so outdated to the dialogue that I would just fill out the blood glucose log on my way into the doctor's office with made up numbers because it didn't really seem to matter if I did it the right way or not. And then as a physician, I really realized that most of my job in the doctor's office was about motivating individual people and really trying to understand the context to change behavior. And people aren't motivated, it turns out, by medical guidelines. People are motivated by what they love in their life, whether that's a partner, a child, a dog. And so if I could start to frame things for people, for example, to get to do exercise and suggest that they take their dog for a walk after dinner, my medical brain is thinking that's going to control their blood glucose. I don't tell them that. I tell them your dog would really love a walk. Great hour to take your dog is 6 p.m. You eat dinner at 5. That would be perfect. And once you start to think about this, I got this sense living in both worlds that there's this world of data that we capture that we don't leverage in healthcare the same way we do in other industries. We often talk about how Amazon has revolutionized the purchasing component. Google has revolutionized content, right? They've taken the industry and completely revolutionized it with data and personalization driven to individual people. But healthcare, as Lee was saying, this is kind of crossing this big gap here. Healthcare had not yet done that. And there's not a better place to start than people with chronic conditions because we know that chronic conditions account for the biggest bulk of healthcare expenditure. We know that millions and millions of people suffer from one or multiple. We know about 70% of people over age of 65 have 2 or more chronic conditions. And so it was a great place for us to focus our energy with a true deep empathy from Glenn, the founder, Lee, the team, around what that experience is really like and how we could create a radically different experience that not only allowed people to enjoy their chronic condition a whiff more rather than we couldn't quite take it away, but we could make that experience more enjoyable, but also improve clinical outcomes and take out a lot of the financial waste and demonstrate cost savings in the ecosystem.
I actually personally relate to diabetes as a condition. Not that I have it, but both my parents had complications. They both passed away because of diabetic complications. So before I dive into data, because I have a ton of questions around data, I know there's so much conversation happening, also some controversial. Let's get back to the big announcement, which is a fascinating, most exciting, the biggest in the history of healthcare. In the midst of a pandemic, you went through an $18.5 billion merger. Tell me more.
I'll start, but I will also start by saying the kudos go to Lee's industry veteran status on many fronts, both starting and leading us through our IPO, then into the merger. But I'm going to start with more of a little bit of a humorous story, and then let Lee take the reins. But Lee, as you know, was a founding member of Livongo and an investor through 7wire and served on the board. And when we were thinking about our ability to really accelerate the business to our clients on behalf of our members, really staying member focused, we started to think about an IPO. And at that time, we did not have a CFO, and Lee left the room to take a phone call. And when he came back in, we told him that he had been voted to become the CFO to lead us through the IPO. So that was when he got to take the reins in an operating style. And that's actually not a joke. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lee.
Lee, please.
Well, and so I must say that with Jenny's prodding and Glenn's prodding, we did take the company public in July of 2019. It was a massive amount of work because as a young company, we didn't necessarily have all the infrastructure in place that would have made us the right candidate to say, well, gee, let's go ahead and access the public markets. And frankly, we had raised a meaningful amount of capital. We had an enviable balance sheet. And so it wasn't like we saw a burning need to be public. And yet what we realized was that if we were going to be a trusted partner for the Fortune 500 clients that we serve and the major health plans and health systems, over 100 health systems that we work with today, they would want to know that they were working with a company that was here for the long term, a company built to last, a company that provided transparent financial statements, and therefore they could had the wherewithal to support them and their members on the journey that they were on to improve health. And so in going public and raising what we thought was, in fact, the largest digital health IPO at the time, raising hundreds of millions of dollars in a record offering, we felt that we were on a mission, and the race really began that day. The IPO was the end of the beginning. And what we were starting to do was to look at ways that we could expand our footprint in a massive market opportunity in the US, but also globally. Unfortunately, we're in a position today where by 2025, with the export of Western style diets and other lifestyles, there will be more individuals in India and China with diabetes than there are people in the United States. And so when we think about helping individuals with chronic disease to live better and healthier lives, it's not limited to Mountain View. It's not limited to Chicago. It is around the world. And to do that, you need a platform. And you need one that's going to have scale and the ability to deliver care in ways that allow you to transcend borders and locations. And as we thought with Jenny's leadership on our strategy about what that future could look like, we saw that being partnered with the leader in telehealth, Teladoc, was going to be a way for us to achieve those objectives. And that led us to having discussions over a relatively short period of time, virtually done the entire deal except for a few face-to-face meetings that were, of course, with masks and socially distanced. But all said and done, a record amount of time for a record deal, the largest of its kind, as you mentioned, Anitha. Jenny, other observations on that?
No, just to underscore that we often get asked the question, why now, why timing, why these two? And the answer to that is because we can accelerate in a way that's otherwise, it gives us an unbelievable chance to accelerate. We think about the 70 million lives that Teladoc has and the data engine and the infrastructure that we've built across the chronic conditions so that we can really service individual people in an acute episodic and chronic way across multiple conditions, and could not be more excited at the ability to take two leaders in their respective sides and bring that together.
What is next? Is digital health now purely digital? Because we live in such fluid spaces, right? I mean, I moved from my virtual reality to my physical desktop, and I'm really moving around and the data flows with me. And then I want to be served as a patient in that same manner. Where is it evolving?
Well, it is truly evolving. And in some sense, we've only just crossed, I'd say, one of the many digital Rubicons to come. Which Rob Walcott will certainly appreciate. And the reason why I say that is that while we've started to understand a bit more about the power of data for health, we've really not yet created personalized pathways, personalized journeys. What we've done at Livongo and will do as Teladoc Livongo is to better informate the healthcare process and to allow those individuals who have that information, the power to make the changes that they need personally. But when you're consulting with a professional, do something different. But we're really starting to now embark on new areas that will allow for us to understand the way in which we metabolize medications. I'll metabolize it differently than Jenny or you. And what does that mean in terms of my dosing? And how can we better personalize the way in which medications are prescribed? Too often we're treating people as just one point along a population curve. Jenny has done this remarkably well with diabetes. When we've treated diabetes in the past, people were measured by their 90-day average for their blood sugar or their HbA1c. And so if she and I had the same average, we might get the same treatment. And yet, if she's keeping her blood sugar in control and mine is varying widely, one would think that even with the same average, we might get treatments that are a little bit different. And I might need a different medication than Jenny to keep my blood sugar in control. So we're learning more about ways to deliver more precision, more guidance, more personalization, and also to take advantage of new technologies. I think there's interesting science that's coming out about ways that we can use virtual reality and augmented reality to help immerse people into environments that reduce anxiety, as an example, or PTSD, or we've even seen interesting companies that are dealing with ways in which we can deal with hormonal swings and allow individuals to manage menopause using some of these new tools. And so we're just at the early stages of learning new things, which is what makes investing in this sector so exciting.
So what are your views? Maybe I'll start with Lee on this, and then I want Jenny to comment. What are your views on longevity and life extension? Because that seems to be the new buzzword, at least here in the Valley.
So our perspective, I think this is not only a 7-Wire perspective, but a Livongo perspective, is it's more important to put more life in your years than years in your life. And how do you add to the quality of lives? I don't know when the last time you had a doctor say to you, you know what, you're doing fine, you don't have to come in. I've been looking at your data, you're doing great, I'm going to cancel your appointment. But that's the place that we've come to using Livongo. It's like, your car is running just fine, don't bring it in for an oil change, save the money. And we should be able to do that. And so where does all of this, I'd say, biometrics and CRISPR and the like come into doing that? They're all really helpful and useful, provided that they're also being able to manage the things that frankly are the leading cause of death. And I think that we can do that with lifestyle guidance and counseling and the lifestyle changes that it engenders. Jenny?
Yeah, well, I love that you started with Lee and the longevity question, because he does have a few years on me, and clearly is wiser than I am. But I would just echo what Lee said, and I think there's another element to putting more life into the years and more years into the life, which is the quality. And one of the things we've really strive for is not just improving clinical outcomes, but making that less painful for people, right? So it is about preventing chronic conditions, but chronic conditions are going to happen. Type 1 diabetes, I'm, as Lee knows, I'm an obsessive exerciser. I eat healthy. I've always been that way. And it's an autoimmune disease, right? And it's now a chronic condition, and there's not a lot I could have done to prevent that. That said, if I can spend, 20 minutes less every day on that condition, I get more years in my life. And so this idea around not only allowing people and encouraging people to prevent, but making it seem, better is a big win. So if you're going to live to be 130, but you're going to spend 50% of every day in the doctor's office trying to live to be 130, I don't know if you're going to take that, right? That's more years in more life, more years in the life rather than life in the years.
I want to jump in with one other point, because something that's near and dear to all of us who are associated with these fine companies. And we've also seen a real focus on disparities in the delivery of care. And one thing that we believe is that digital health can reach into rural communities. It can reach across urban boundaries. We can find ways to help address some of those disparities by making healthcare more accessible. Most Americans have access to a cell phone. They can then have access to a variety of the services that we offer as a combined entity in ways that they might not be able to get in their community. And if they have access to the internet, and there are still many who do not, but we're working to improve that, they can have access to additional modes of communication. But I think that the importance that's coming from this change, this shift that Jenny referred to in terms of acceptance of these solutions, will also make care more accessible for so many who need it.
Wow, I think that is so true, because the inequity in healthcare system, and especially right now with the Black Lives Matter, which is a very important, that's an entire population, which it's not, top quality is not guaranteed across the board. I think, this personalization approach that with Livongo, you have built and continuing to kind of push it forward, I think is going to be phenomenal in, bridging that equity, the parity issue that we have in, access to healthcare, which is fantastic, by the way. I know we have a couple of more minutes, so I just want to ask, what's your crystal ball for humans? And then what's your crystal ball for literally, let's say, this decade?
I think in relative to health conditions, I think that we will continue to have a lot that we cope with and struggle with. I think chronic conditions are clearly on the rise. We've seen infectious conditions clearly in the pandemic mode. You talk about climate, which will further exacerbate the current underlying chronic conditions. And at the same time, I see that where we are in digital healthcare, back to the crossing the Rubicon comment, as we really are at this incredible inflection point to change the experience and change the healthcare delivery system. And we can only get better from where we are. So I remain, despite the ongoing consistency of chronic conditions, the health impacts of infections and climate, I remain highly optimistic that we'll really start to improve the lives of individual people, because we're doing this at a very different approach, and that's scalable and meaningful at the individual level. Could not be more excited to be a part and a player in digital healthcare at this highly transformative time.
That was great, Jenny, and tough to follow. What I would say is that the lesson for me from the current pandemic is how interconnected we all are. When you think about a disease that has origins in Southeast Asia and how quickly it spread, not only there, but into North America and then the rest of the world, it shows that we're interconnected, but it also reinforces, in my mind, the responsibility that we have for each other. I was in a meeting with the American Heart Association earlier today, and there was a quote talking about how can I have dreams if my neighbors are having nightmares? And what we need to do is to recognize that we have a responsibility for one another that comes from building bridges and not building walls. And where I see digital health is being able to transcend borders, to transcend communities, to transcend some of the differences socially and economically. And my hope is that we recognize the power of these types of solutions and share them broadly, as opposed to keep them contained and isolated. And that's the world that I'd like to see us living in 10 years from now.
Wow. I think what a great way to end. Really, thank you so much. Like, this has just been an incredible conversation. I'm sure like there's no limit to how much more we can get your insights and your wisdom. But again, congratulations on this phenomenal merger and the road ahead and the incredible future. And thank you so much for actually building Livongo and really shaping, people's lives. And I think it's a direct impact. So again, Lee Shapiro and Dr. Jennifer Schneider, thank you so much for joining me at the Twin Tech 2020. And we can't wait to hopefully see you in person soon.
Thank you.
And
thank you,
have
Anitha.
a wonderful
Thank
day.
you so much.